Lieutenant Pierre Moreau crouched in the communication trench, his fingers trembling as he decoded the intercepted German message that would change the course of the bloodiest battle in human history. At 26 years old, he had been a mathematics professor at the Sorbonne before the war transformed him into one of France's most skilled cryptographers. The paper in his hands, retrieved from a dead German messenger just hours earlier, contained information that could save the fortress city of Verdun, or seal its doom if he had made an error in translation. The date was February 20th, 1916, and the German assault on Verdun was entering its fifth day. What had begun as Operation Judgment, Germany's attempt to bleed France white by attacking a position the French would defend at any cost, had already claimed over 30,000 casualties on both sides. The ancient fortress city, which had stood for over 1,000 years as a symbol of French resilience, was now the epicenter of a battle that threatened to determine the outcome of the entire war. Pierre had arrived at Verdun 3 days earlier as part of a specialized intelligence unit attached to the French Second Army. His mission was to intercept and decode German communications, providing French commanders with crucial information about enemy plans and troop movements. It was dangerous work that required him to operate close to the front lines, often within range of German artillery, but his mathematical mind had proven exceptionally suited to breaking enemy codes. The fortress of Verdun itself was unlike anything Pierre had ever seen. Built on a series of hills overlooking the Meuse River, it consisted of dozens of underground forts connected by tunnels and communication trenches. The main citadel, carved deep into solid rock, housed thousands of French soldiers and served as the nerve center for the defense of the entire region. But after 5 days of unprecedented German bombardment, even these massive fortifications were beginning to show signs of strain. Pierre's workspace was located in a reinforced dugout 30 feet below ground, connected to the main citadel by a network of tunnels that had been expanded continuously since the battle began. The chamber was cramped and poorly ventilated, lit only by oil lamps and filled with a constant sound of explosions echoing through the earth above. Radio equipment, code books, and intercepted messages covered every available surface, creating organized chaos that somehow made sense to the small team of cryptographers working around the clock. What would you do if you discovered information that could change the course of history, but acting on it meant risking everything? The message Pierre was decoding had been recovered under extraordinary circumstances. A German messenger carrying dispatches between forward units and headquarters had been killed by French artillery while attempting to cross no man's land during the previous night's fighting. French soldiers had retrieved his body and the sealed message pouch he carried, bringing both back to their lines before dawn. When the message pouch reached Pierre's intelligence unit, it contained several routine communications about ammunition supplies and casualty reports. But one document was different. A lengthy encoded message marked with the highest security classification that Pierre had ever encountered. The encryption was far more sophisticated than typical field communications, suggesting that it contained information of extraordinary importance. Pierre had been working on the code for 18 hours straight, sustained only by black coffee and the knowledge that thousands of French lines might depend on his success. The German cryptographic system was based on a complex mathematical cipher that required not just language skills, but advanced understanding of algebraic formulas and probability theory. It was the kind of intellectual challenge that would have fascinated him in peacetime, but now carried life and death implications. As the pieces of the code began to fall into place, Pierre felt a growing sense of both excitement and dread. The message was revealing details of German operational plans that went far beyond typical tactical communications. This wasn't just information about the next day's assault. It was a comprehensive outline of Germany's entire strategy for the Battle of Verdun. The decoded message revealed that the German High Command had committed far more resources to Operation Judgment than French intelligence had realized. Instead of the estimated 200,000 troops that French commanders believed they were facing, the Germans had actually deployed over 500,000 men to the Verdun sector. More ominously, the message indicated that the current bombardment was only the preliminary phase of a much larger offensive planned to begin in 48 hours. According to the German plans, the main assault would focus on Fort Douaumont, the largest and most important fortress in the Verdun defensive system. The Germans intended to capture this key position through a coordinated attack involving massive artillery bombardment, poison gas, and elite stormtrooper units specially trained in fortress assault techniques. If Douaumont fell, the entire defensive line would collapse and Verdun would be doomed. Have you ever discovered information that completely changed your understanding of a situation? How did it feel? But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. As Pierre continued decoding, he discovered that the German message contained detailed intelligence about French defensive positions, troop strengths, and artillery placements. The information was so accurate and up-to-date that it could only have come from a high-level source within the French command structure. Someone with access to the most sensitive military information was providing intelligence to the Germans. Pierre stared at the decoded message with growing horror. Not only was France facing a German offensive far larger than anyone had imagined, but the enemy possessed detailed knowledge of French defensive preparations. The combination of overwhelming German numbers and precise intelligence about French weaknesses made the situation nearly hopeless. The young cryptographer faced an agonizing decision. Military protocol required him to report his findings immediately to French commanders, but doing so would reveal that France had intercepted and decoded high-level German communications. This might prompt the Germans to change their encryption systems, eliminating a crucial source of intelligence for future operations. On the other hand, failing to warn French commanders would condemn thousands of soldiers to death in a battle they were not prepared to fight. Pierre decided that saving lives took precedence over protecting intelligence sources. He carefully prepared a summary of the decoded information and requested an immediate meeting with General Pétain, who had just been appointed to command the defense of Verdun. The general was known for his methodical approach to warfare and his genuine concern for his soldiers' welfare, qualities that made him receptive to intelligence that could reduce casualties. The meeting took place in Petain's command post, a reinforced bunker located in the basement of Verdun's city hall. Despite the constant sound of artillery bombardment overhead, the atmosphere in the bunker was calm and professional. Maps covered the walls, showing the current positions of French and German forces, while staff officers moved quietly between planning tables, coordinating the defense of the fortress city. General Pétain was a tall, distinguished man with a white mustache and penetrating gray eyes that seemed to evaluate everything with mathematical precision. At 60 years old, he was older than most French commanders, but his reputation for careful planning and concern for his men's lives had made him the obvious choice to lead Verdun's defense during its darkest hour. Lieutenant Moreau, Pétain said after reviewing Pierre's decoded message, "If this information is accurate, we are facing a crisis far beyond anything we had imagined. 500,000 German troops, detailed knowledge of our defenses, and a coordinated assault on Fort Douaumont within 48 hours. The question is, what do we do with this intelligence?" Share your thoughts in the comments below. How would you have handled such overwhelming odds? Pierre had spent hours considering that exact question. "General, I believe we have one advantage the Germans don't know we possess. We know their plans while they believe their communications remain secure. If we can convince them that their assault plans have been discovered through routine reconnaissance rather than code breaking, we might be able to use their own strategy against them." What followed was one of the most audacious deceptions in military history. Rather than simply reinforcing Fort Douaumont with additional troops, which might alert German intelligence at the fact that their plans had been discovered, Pétain and Pierre developed a more subtle approach. They would allow the Germans to believe their preparations remained secret while quietly repositioning French forces to counter the planned offensive. The deception required extraordinary attention to detail. French reinforcements were moved to Verdun using routes and methods that would appear routine to German observers. Artillery positions were adjusted to provide better coverage of the approaches to Fort Douaumont, but the changes were implemented gradually over several days to avoid attracting attention. Most importantly, French commanders were instructed to maintain radio communications that suggested they remained unaware of the scale of the German buildup. Pierre played a crucial role in the deception by creating false intelligence reports that were deliberately allowed to fall into German hands. These reports suggested that French commanders believed they were facing a limited offensive, involving perhaps 100,000 German troops focused on different objectives entirely. The goal was to convince German intelligence that their operational security remained intact, while French forces quietly prepared for the real assault. The next 48 hours were among the most tense in Pierre's life. He continued his normal code-breaking activities while simultaneously coordinating the intelligence deception that might determine Verdun's fate. German radio traffic remained heavy, providing additional details about enemy preparations, but Pierre had to be careful not to reveal too much knowledge of German plans through French countermeasures. As the deadline for the German assault approached, Pierre found himself questioning whether his decoded message had been accurate. The possibility that he had made an error in translation haunted him. If he was wrong about the timing or scale of the German offensive, thousands of French soldiers might die because resources had been misdirected based on his intelligence. The weight of responsibility was crushing for a young mathematics professor who had never intended to become a key figure in military operations. On the morning of February 22nd, Pierre's decoded intelligence was vindicated in the most dramatic way possible. At exactly 5:30 a.m., German artillery began the most intense artillery bombardment in military history up to that point. Over 1,400 guns opened fire simultaneously, launching more than 2 million shells at French positions over the next 10 hours. The sound was audible over 100 miles away, and the ground shook so violently that seismographs in neighboring countries recorded the bombardment as earthquake activity. But thanks to Pierre's intelligence, French forces were ready. Artillery positions that would have been destroyed by the German bombardment had been relocated during the previous 2 days. Reinforcements had been positioned to counter the assault on Fort Douaumont before the Germans realized they were there. Most importantly, French commanders knew that the bombardment was a prelude to infantry assault rather than an end in itself, allowing them to preserve their forces for the real battle to come. Could you imagine living through the most intense artillery bombardment in history, knowing you had helped prepare for it? When German infantry finally advanced toward Fort Douaumont, they encountered resistance far more organized and effective than their plans had anticipated. French artillery, positioned based on Pierre's decoded intelligence about German assault routes, devastated the attacking formations before they could reach their objectives. Elite German stormtrooper units, trained specifically for fortress assault, found their specialized tactics countered by French defenders who seemed to anticipate their every move. The battle for Fort Douaumont lasted 3 days and ultimately ended in German tactical victory. They did succeed in capturing the fortress, but the cost was far higher than German commanders had expected, and the French defense was so effective that it disrupted the entire timeline of Operation Judgment. What was supposed to be a quick breakthrough that would lead to Verdun's rapid fall instead became a prolonged siege that would last 10 months and ultimately failed to achieve German strategic objectives. Pierre's role in the defense of Fort Douaumont remained secret for decades after the war. Official records credited the effective French response to superior reconnaissance and tactical flexibility, making no mention of code-breaking activities. But those who knew the truth understood that Pierre's 18 hours of mathematical work had saved thousands of French lives and possibly changed the outcome of World War I. The intelligence coup had broader implications beyond the immediate tactical success. The continued interception and decoding of German communications provided French commanders with detailed knowledge of enemy plans throughout the Battle of Verdun. Pierre and his small team of cryptographers became an invisible but crucial element in France's ability to match German resources and ultimately survive the longest single battle in human history. As the Battle of Verdun continued through 1916, Pierre's workload increased exponentially. German communications traffic grew heavier as commanders attempted to coordinate increasingly complex operations, providing more opportunities for interception, but also requiring longer hours and more sophisticated mathematical analysis. Pierre often worked 20-hour days, sustained only by coffee and the knowledge that his work was making a difference in humanity's most destructive conflict. The psychological toll of the work was enormous. Pierre was constantly aware that his mathematical errors could result in military disasters and massive casualties. At the same time, successfully decoded messages often contained information about planned German attacks that would kill thousands of young men on both sides. The abstract intellectual challenge of code breaking was inseparable from the human reality of industrial warfare. Let us know in the comments how you think someone could handle such psychological pressure day after day. By the end of 1916, Pierre had decoded over 300 German messages, providing French commanders with unprecedented insight into enemy capabilities and intentions. His work had contributed to French tactical successes throughout the Battle of Verdun, helping to transform what was intended to be a German breakthrough into a grinding war of attrition that ultimately favored the defenders. But the personal cost had been severe. Pierre had lost significant weight, developed chronic insomnia, and showed signs of what would later be recognized as combat stress reaction. The constant pressure of knowing that lives depended on his mathematical accuracy, combined with the physical strain of working in underground bunkers under artillery bombardment, had pushed him to the edge of psychological collapse. In December 1916, as the Battle of Verdun finally wound down to its inconclusive end, Pierre was transferred to a military hospital in Paris for rest and medical evaluation. Doctors diagnosed him with nervous exhaustion and recommended extended leave from military service. But Pierre had difficulty adjusting to civilian life after spending 10 months in the intensity of wartime cryptography. The French victory at Verdun, for it was ultimately a French victory despite the enormous cost, had multiple causes. Superior logistics, effective artillery coordination, and outstanding leadership all played crucial roles. But historians who gained access to classified records decades later recognized that intelligence advantages provided by cryptographers like Pierre Moreau had been equally important. Knowledge of German plans had allowed French commanders to optimize their limited resources and counter enemy initiatives before they could succeed. After the war, Pierre attempted to return to his position at the Sorbonne, but found that his wartime experiences had changed him fundamentally. The abstract mathematical problems that had once fascinated him seemed trivial compared to the life and death applications of his wartime cryptography work. He struggled to find meaning in academic mathematics after spending years applying mathematical principles to save human lives. Pierre eventually found a new career working for the French government in communication security, helping to develop cryptographic systems that would protect French military communications in future conflicts. His wartime experience had given him unique insights into both the vulnerabilities and capabilities of communication encryption, making him invaluable in peacetime intelligence work. Share your thoughts about how war experiences might change someone's entire perspective on their life's work. The secret message that Pierre decoded on February 20th, 1916 was preserved in French military archives and was finally declassified in 1976, 60 years after the Battle of Verdun. Historians studying the document were amazed by its accuracy and the sophistication of Pierre's cryptographic work. The mathematical techniques he had developed under battlefield conditions were decades ahead of their time and contributed to advances in code breaking that would prove crucial during World War II. Pierre lived until 1973, reaching the age of 83, and witnessing both world wars, the development of electronic computers, and the beginning of the space age. Throughout his long life,
He remained modest about his wartime contributions, rarely discussing his role in the defense of Verdun except for fellow veterans and cryptography professionals. But on the 50th anniversary of the Battle of Verdun in 1966, Pierre was finally recognized publicly for his contributions to French victory. President Charles de Gaulle, himself a veteran of Verdun, personally awarded Pierre the Legion of Honor in a ceremony at the restored Fort de Monde. In his remarks, de Gaulle noted that mathematical genius and patriotic courage had combined to save France's most sacred fortress and preserve French honor in our nation's darkest hour.
The citation for Pierre's Legion of Honor decoration read simply, "For exceptional service in defense of Verdun, 1916. Through mathematical skill and personal courage, Lieutenant Moreau provided intelligence that saved thousands of French lives and contributed to ultimate victory in humanity's longest battle." It was an understated recognition for work that had helped change the course of world history. Today, visitors to the Verdun battlefield can see monuments to the 700,000 men who were killed or wounded during the 10-month battle. The landscape still bears scars from the massive artillery bombardments that turned entire forests into moonscapes of shell craters and shattered trees. Fort de Monde has been restored and now serves as a museum commemorating the battle and honoring those who fought there. But few visitors realize that one of the most crucial elements in Verdun's defense was the mathematical work of a young professor who spent 18 hours decoding a single German message. Pierre Moreau's contribution reminds us that victory in modern warfare often depends not just on courage and firepower, but on intelligence, planning, and the application of scientific knowledge to military problems. Let us know how this story of intellectual courage and mathematical skill affected you. The small underground chamber where Pierre decoded the message that changed the Battle of Verdun was sealed after the war and forgotten for decades. But in 1986, archaeological excavations at Verdun uncovered the room along with Pierre's original worksheets and mathematical calculations. The documents, remarkably preserved in the dry underground environment, provided historians with unprecedented insight into World War I cryptography and intelligence operations. Pierre's mathematical notes, written in pencil on military forms during those crucial 18 hours in February 1916, are now displayed in the Memorial Museum at Verdun. Visitors can see the exact calculations he used to break the German code, the corrections and revisions he made as he worked through the complex cipher, and his final decoded translation of the message that revealed German plans for the assault on Fort de Monde. The display includes a quote from Pierre's post-war memoir, written shortly before his death. "Mathematics taught me that elegant solutions often exist for seemingly impossible problems. War taught me that such solutions can save thousands of lives. I am grateful that my education allowed me to serve France when mathematical knowledge was most needed. And I hope that future generations will remember that sometimes the most important battles are fought not with rifles and artillery, but with pencil, paper, and human intelligence." Lieutenant Pierre Moreau's story demonstrates that heroism in warfare takes many forms. While popular imagination often focuses on dramatic battlefield actions, the reality is that victory frequently depends on quiet work performed by individuals with specialized knowledge and skills. Pierre's mathematical genius, applied under the most stressful conditions imaginable, helped save one of France's most important fortresses and contributed to ultimate Allied victory in World War I. His legacy reminds us that intellectual courage, the willingness to trust one's knowledge and abilities when lives hang in the balance, is as important as physical bravery in determining the outcome of human conflicts. The secret message that Pierre decoded changed the Battle of Verdun, and by extension, changed world history. It stands as a testament to the power of human intelligence, mathematical skill, and individual dedication in the face of seemingly impossible odds. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment to share your thoughts.